Hello and welcome to this round 8 here at GP Sydney, and there are a couple of familiar faces in our feature match area squaring off here at 6 and 1. Brian Braun-Duin, he is chasing a dream, that dream to be the player with the most GP points over the course of this year. That will earn him a spot in the World Championship in PAX very, very soon. He's facing another Hall of Famer though, Makihito Mihara, a very powerful magician, and with just a couple of rounds left to go, these guys desperately wanting to pick up some wins because they really make a big difference to the overall sort of trajectory of these players going later into the tournament.
It looks like we're in a blue-red mirror match. That is the archetype where spells matter a lot. As we saw, BBD already has a Turmoil Alchemist on the battlefield, an O3 that, there you see it on screen, gets to ping opponents for 1, and then when you play a spell, such as take Inventory, you get to untap it and ping once again.
Yeah.
Also a bunch of artifacts here. Cryptolith Fragment, that's an interesting new addition, also from Eldritch Moon. You can tap it for a mana and then both players lose a life, but when both players get below 10, it suddenly transforms into quite a threatening 1/4 flyer that drains opponents for even more life points when it attacks.
Yeah, it's definitely a powerful card, and one that I know a lot of people have said it creates an interesting extra little sub-game in Magic, because the mana and life loss is problematic, and once Aurora of Emrakul comes along, yeah, it's potentially a massive problem for some decks to be able to deal with. But Thermo Alchemist is a card that, when I first saw it, I was a little underwhelmed. It didn't feel like it was doing quite enough. It turns out these matches, especially in sealed, seem to be moving to a length where having that just consistent source of damage, pecking away, is actually just fantastic.
Exactly. It can hold an opposing 2-drop at bay. If there's a 2/2 attacking you, you can just block it with the O3. And if the game goes long and you have a deck with plenty of spells, the amount of damage, as you mentioned, can really add up. There's a Vildenpeck Outcast, a 4/4 trample that can transform into an even bigger creature for 7 mana, but more importantly, it can be boosted +1, -1 for 1 red mana until end of turn.
Yeah, it takes a bit of time to get up to the 7 mana to transform it, and indeed it may take even longer with Makihito Mihara here, able to find a way of putting at least one card back on top of Brian Braun-Duin's deck here. As he plays a Lashweed Lurker, he's able to make sure that a non-land permanent goes on top of Brian Braun-Duin's library. And not only does that mean that Brian Braun-Duin has to recast his Vildenpeck Outcast, it also means he's not drawing a new card for the turn.
And note that even though Mihara does not have any forests among his land base, Cryptolith Fragment taps for any color of mana, so that's how he was able to cast it, in case you were wondering.
Yeah, nice play there by Mihara. And we do see the Vildenpeck Outcast coming back down again. Brian Braun-Duin keen to try and attack life totals in a sort of more aggressive fashion than Mihara's plan, which is for each player's life total to go down by approximately 1 point at a time.
Yeah, this might be a game where ultimately life points only dwindle by 1 point until someone is down to 0. That would be unusual, but easily possible the way this game is shaping up.
Crow of Dark Tidings there, putting a couple of cards into Mihara's graveyard, one of them being the very powerful Accursed Witch. Interestingly, kind of gets better with a Merge in the mix, because it means that sometimes it's easier to kill off your own Accursed Witch and indeed then transform it. Though it was already a pretty powerful Magic card.
Yep. So BBD attacks, even though he doesn't have 7 mana to transform his Vildenpeck Outcast. And, well, that'll work.
Yeah, in a struggle there, met by a Turnacide. Turnacide, a card that sometimes you see more as a sideboard option, but Mihara deciding it's good enough for the main deck. Just 1 mana, counter target spell that targets a permanent that you control. And that has proven to be a very big game here, forcing something else from Brian Braun-Duin, and that something else is simply a pump in order to secure the trade there. Turnacide doing great work there. It's a 1-for-1 trade in terms of card for card, but Mihara only having to spend a single point of mana in order to achieve that.
Yeah, this is not a high pick, I would say, especially for games of draft. But it is decent in seal deck because Mihara might have several bomb creatures that he wants to protect. In seal deck, opponents often tend to play all the removal spells, the creature removal spells that they open, or at least a large amount, making Turnaside perhaps a little better. Still not a premium card, but hey, it did a lot of work in this game, as we saw.
The most impressive thing that I've seen done with it thus far, countering a Spreading Flames. They spend 7
Ooh.
mana, you spend 1, and they
Yep.
end up potentially looking a little foolish.
Pretty sweet. Haunted Dead being amongst the cards milled there. That could come back onto the battlefield for 1 black, 1 colorless, and a card. And might also bring a 1/1 spirit with it. So at the moment the board is relatively empty in a way. There is the Traben Gargoyle that could transform into a 4/2 flyer on BBD side of the battlefield. But Mihara has a fine blocker in terms of his Crow. Well, that Wailing Ghoul is not going to attack into the Turmoil Alchemist. So at the moment, well, actually that Liliana's Elite is the biggest creature on the battlefield.
We're just going to get a count of the creatures in the graveyard there. It looks like we have 1, 2, is that 3 there?
I see 2 creatures.
There's
So
the
that would make-
cultist. There's 4 in total.
Oh, right.
So currently a 5/5 and plenty of potential to get even larger.
For sure. This is a type of payoff card that works quite well in the blue-black self-mill or graveyard matters archetype. Also, if the game would go long, then well, Mihara has access to Westvale Abbey. He is not able to activate it yet. He needs an additional land in order to do so. But once he gets there, he can start making some cultists, and those cultists will eventually summon Ormandal.
Yeah, if you're looking for ways to end games, Ormandal is a pretty classy way to do it. Though against blue decks, you do need to be a little bit concerned about the amount of different bounce options available. While Ormandal is indestructible, bounce effects still work just fine and set the player that has sacrificed all those creatures back quite a long way. Stitchwing Scab there, the play for Brian Braun doing. He's looking to try and get busy in the air at some point, but in the meantime, you know, he has got that Thermo Alchemist just pecking away.
Well, that Liliana's Elite, the 5/5, can definitely get in there. There's no big risk. At worst, BBD blocks it with the 2/2 and the 3/1, but that's a trade that Mihara is probably fine with. Attacking with the Crow of Dark Titans seems to be a little aggressive, given that Mihara is behind in the damage race. That said, if BBD doesn't block it, then BBD will fall down to 10 life, meaning that this Cryptolith Fragment, if it would, at the beginning of Mihara's upkeep, it would transform into the Aurora of Emrakul. So BBD may not, although he may not be happy to block here, well, falling down to 10 life or lower is not something he's going to be happy with. Well, actually, if BBD just takes the 5 damage from Liliana's Elite, going down to 12 and trades for the Crow of Dark Tidings, just one. No, then the Cryptolith Fragment would not be able to transform on the next upkeep yet.
Of course, one thing that Mihara has going for him, he has 5 mana untapped of 3 different, of 5 colors given the fragment that he has. That meaning that he could be representing all sorts of combat tricks here. This is a little bit of a fishy attack, and so part of what we see on Brian Braundu's face here is him trying to figure out what the various tricks are in this format that he might have to play around. And of course, once you add a second set to your limited format, the number of tricks increases greatly. I mean, one of the ones that I'm looking at here when you've got multiple attackers that are potentially going to cause trouble is something like Abandoned Reason to give your guys first strike if there's different kinds of blocking going on. But there's just lots and lots of different options here that Brian Braunduin needs to at least consider.
Well, it looks like Brian Braunduin goes for the Protect My Life total plan, which makes sense, especially in the face of that Cryptolith Fragment. You don't want to fall down to 10 or less life. It's just a jump block. You don't like jump blocking when you can help it. Then again, that Traben Gargle was just a 2/2. Sure, it would have the potential of transforming into a 4/2, but that comes at a cost of 6 mana, and Brian still has plenty of spells in hand to spend his mana on over the course of the next few turns. So that is the game plan he's committed to here. Hopefully packing away for enough incidental points of damage with his Thermo Alchemist. Fogwalker, that's a 1/3 Skulk, and it means that Liliana's Elite is not going to untap on the next untap step.
Yeah, that ability just earning him a short reprieve here, and welcome to the fold, meaning that Crow of Dark Tidings is going to switch allegiances unless Makihito Mihara has something to say about it. The classy thing to do there would be to find a way of increasing its toughness in response so that the spell can't resolve. In practice, though, it looks like there's nothing going on there for Makihito Mihara. He has to just let his Zombie Crow go, and indeed getting these Restless Dead back into play means that his Liliana's Elite, which isn't going to be untapping here, is going to be just a touch smaller for now.
Well, this is a sweet play. Using the discard from Haunted Dead to bring it back onto the battlefield to good use. Twins of Mawar Estate being discarded there. A 3/5, but hey, thanks to Madness, it will enter the battlefield at the end of BBD's turn.
And
Suddenly
effectively do so at a discount, just 3 mana rather than 5.
Yeah. And the Haunted Dead also brings a 1/1 Spirit with it, with flying. That is why the Stitchwing Scarp most likely did not attack for BBD.
Looks like Newscraft Mob there, that was the other card discarded. So Mihara's on 6 here, really looking to try and get Brian Braun at least down below 10, because it puts him in a better position in terms of being able to deal with flying attackers.
Well, just one land from Mihara would allow him to transform Westville Abbey into Ormondale. He currently has 5 creatures on the battlefield. This means that if it weren't for that Westville Abbey, that Thermal Alchemist on BBD side of the board would be super scary, because it would eventually just whittle down Mihara's life total down to 0. But that Ormondale, if Mihara decides to go for it, and it obviously is a bit risky, can give him back a bunch of life points thanks to lifelink. Now the problem with just making Ormondale is that there is a common in Eldritch Moon, Drag Under, that will just return any card, any creature to back to the opponent's hand. That is a perfect answer to Ormondale. Sure, Mihara would be able to get one hit in with it perhaps, but that wouldn't be enough to close out the game. And then, well, that Ormondale will just be bounced back to his hand. That may be what he is considering at the moment.
Yeah, and even once you get past that option, there are still things like Unsubstantiate, there are still things like Just the Wind. I mean, of the 3, certainly the one that you'd want to be casting is Drag Under, but any of those options would deal with Ormondale pretty happily. The red side of Brian Braunduin's deck possibly a little bit more afraid of Ormondale than the blue side.
I'm just gonna go with Brian Braunduin from now on.
Brown down?
Yeah. German, Dutch. Okay.
Very well.
How about we stick with BBD? That's
all right, we can agree on that much. Makihito Mihara here. Considering his options, he does want to be able to keep putting pressure on BBD's life total here.
Looks like Mihara is not going for Ormondale just yet. Playing around any of those blue bounce spells that we mentioned. There's also Sleep Paralysis, a common from Shadows over Innistrad, that can lock down Ormondale. So it is definitely a risky proposition to make it. Ghostly Wings being put on the on the Crow of Dark Tidings that BBD gained control of with Welcome to the Fold, and now being bounced back into, well, the owner's hand. The owner was Mihara, so that's a nice way to get back for BBD stealing his creature.
Yeah, turnabout fair play there. Getting Crow of Dark Tidings back into play, and just redressing the balance a little bit in terms of flyers is a pretty big deal here.
Yeah. Down to 4 for Mihara. It's getting a little dangerous. We're now crippling, well, chilling grasp. That'll tap down. Oh, that'll tap down his flying blockers, meaning that the Stitchwing Scarp could get in. It actually untapped the Thermal Alchemist, which would ping down the final damage. Wow, Mihara looked to be pretty safe there in a way. Still at a fine life total, you know, with 2 blockers for the flyer, but 2 of them were tapped down, and all of a sudden BBD closed out that game. Wow.
Now, I mean, if you're not quite sure about how Thermo Alchemist is likely to play in this format, just look at how much damage it was able to deal over the course of that game. Ultimately, that was kind of one of the big deciding factors here as we move across to see 2 of our undefeated players thus far in round 8. Andrew Cuneo on the left of our screen, also on red-blue, much like Brian Braun doing, and he's got a Wretched Griff in play. On the other side of things, Huang Haoshan, he is on blue-white, and there we have Abyssinian Priest, and indeed an Ox just swinging in here.
Yep, Inquisitor's Ox. Currently, well, vigilancing it up thanks to the True Fate sensor. 3-6, pretty big. So Cuneo looks to be behind on the battlefield as his big Eldrazi flyer is being tapped down by the Sigardian Priest. And, well, Cuneo is facing down 2 pretty big attackers at this point. Comes up with a 3/3 flash flyer to well, hopefully get back into the race.
Yeah, I mean, he has got the flyers here. It's just he needs to be paying fairly careful attention to his own life total. And the Paladin that's in play for Huang Haoshan here, just the fact that it's got lifelink, the fact it's got vigilance, the fact that it's just pretty big, is all kind of adding up to make life really quite difficult. It means that even if Huang Haoshan can't actually kill off Cuneo in one fell swoop, he can certainly put his own life total far away enough that it's going to be difficult to get past.
Ooh la la. That is a 7/7.
Yeah, if you're looking to cast Geralt's Monstrosity, this is the way to do it. Get an empty hand, because as a 7/7 flyer it is terrifying, but it gets smaller based on every card in your hand. So even though it is very large for its cost, you need to be very careful about the way that its size is managed, because drawing extra cards, normally exactly the kind of thing that any right-thinking magician is looking to be doing, not quite so good with the Messenger in play.
Yep.
Monstrosity in play, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, it really turned this game around. I thought Huang Haoshan was way ahead, but this 7/7 flyer, like, one, it produces an awesome blocker, because Haoshan can't really attack into it with either of his creatures. Both of them will be taken down in a block. And 2, it sets up a humongous attacker. Cuneo can just say attack twice with the 7/7 and finish off Haoshan that way. Haoshan now really has to find a way to deal with it. If he finds a removal spell or a bounce spell, anything like that, well, he probably would have played it already. But he needs a card like that in order to get out of that, because a 7/7 flyer on the other side of the battlefield, that is a tough one to beat.
Well, Storm Raider rig a fine blocker here, and it does get suited up with that Truth Face sensor. We are going to get a chance to move back to our main match, though. We'll keep giving you updates on how things are going with that particular one. But Brian Braun, he has a lot to think about here, and Curious Homunculus, his first play. This is one that the value of it varies hugely based on the exact details of what's in your deck. In a red-blue spells deck with enough spells, and we see a take inventory there, it can be very powerful indeed.
Yep, it will transform in your upkeep if you have 3 or more instants or sorceries into the graveyard, and then it transforms into a 3/4 prowess that just makes all of your other instants and sorceries cheaper. Now, a 3/4 prowess is an awesome deal for 2 mana. Obviously, yeah, it won't really transform that quickly, but in a well-constructed blue-red spells deck, which admittedly we see more of in draft than in sealed, because in draft you have more control over the cards that you pick. Well, it can indeed be a powerful card. No spell yet, just a hungry vampire.
Yeah, the Insatiable Gorgers, 5-3 for 4. Very effective in terms of power to cost ratio. Does have to attack each turn. It's effectively kind of the red juggernaut of the set. Has madness, though in this case the madness not being used.
Yep.
Mihara activates a warped landscape, able to fetch his third colour, that being green there with that forest.
Yeah, this will also allow him to activate ongoing investigation to get rid of some creatures in his graveyard and turn them into life and clues. So many colors in Mihara's deck. I see a mountain in his hand there. Maybe that Cryptolith Fragment is holding it all together.
I mean, it's a great card even if you're just a 2-colour deck. So when you're a 5-colour deck, oof.
There we see Drag Under, so that vampire will have to skip a meal for another turn.
It does not like skipping meals.
Oh no.
It doesn't like skipping either. It likes attacking in a more sort of classically aggressive fashion. Two clues in play here for Makihito Mihara here, and a great tempo play there for the
Drag Under.
Drag Under. Drawing a card while bouncing a creature and bouncing something that cost more than the Drag Under itself, kind of important, means that he's got some mana up here potentially to do a little bit extra,
Yeah,
even if that extra is just drawing a clue, using a clue.
You gain a little bit of tempo this way, and you don't lose out on card economy, so that's always good.
Little impact outcast there coming from Brian Braun-Duin.
Well, that 4/4 may prevent the cultist from attacking on this turn.
The cultist, though, a perfectly fine blocker. I mean, yes, there's trample on the outcast, but at least you're drawing a card as and when it dies.
It's also super sweet with emerge creatures. It is almost tailor-made for that. Sacrifice the cultist to any emerge creature. You reduce its mana cost by a lot. Well, there we see it. There's a Lashweed Lurker, and you draw a card for your trouble. What more could a blue-green mage wish for?
Yeah, doing it all there. And the Lashweed Lurker, it's pretty sizable here. It is going to mean that Brian Braun-Duin isn't in quite as easy a spot to figure out what to do next, but I can see that there are some burn spells lurking in Brian Braun-Duin's hand, and he now certainly has a target for it. Lashweed Lurker, 4 toughness, that's a lot, but the red decks, they do have ways of piecing that together. I mean, we will see exactly which one he goes for, but an Alchemist's Greeting is almost tailor-made to deal with Lashweed Lurker, even if a cultist is tailor-made to help power it out.
Yep, and that would produce the second spell in BBD's graveyard for the Curious Homunculus, meaning that he would only need one more in order to transform it.
Well,
Meanwhile,
Spreading Flames is another card in his hand, and at some point that one could be a big deal.
BBD just passed the turn without playing anything. Obviously, Mihara now has to wonder, okay, there is some instance coming up, otherwise you would have just replayed the Wildenpack Outcast and just put on the top of your library, so something will be up, but hey, I'll just attack. Ooh.
Elder Deep Fiend, we've seen it before from Brian Braun-Duin, and once again a powerful option. Taps down 4 of Makihito Mihara's lands. That significantly hampers what might be going on here from Mihara. Likely to float some mana here, I would imagine. There's no harm in not doing that.
This is one angry octopus. Yeah, Mihara certainly was expecting some trick here. Must have been. Not sure he was expecting the Elder Deep Fiend, but this is a top-notch rare.
The angry octopus might well be an angry blocktopus here. There's plenty of creatures coming in on Makihito Mihara's side of things. And with Flash, it is going to be able to be declared as a blocker on the Lashweed Lurker. Takes that one out.
Yeah, looks like Mihara was not expecting that Elder Deep Fiend here. Otherwise, he would have never attacked with the Lashweed Lurker.
I mean, it is a rare, so it's not necessarily something that you are naturally going to play around. But this being game 2, potentially if Brian Braun-Duin can take it here, there won't be an opportunity for Mihara to play around it in game 3.
Yep. Yeah, I'm guessing that Mihara was more thinking about a card like Lightning Axe being the reason why BBD passed the turn, but oh boy, that Deep Fiend. It truly took over the game. Sure, Mihara was able to use the mana, the lands that were tapped down to crack a clue and create another one, but when it comes to the current board state, Brian Bronduen is far ahead.
Yeah, one of the rares that you're really looking to get a hold of if you can.
BBD is looking at the GP Master slot, his ticket into the potential World Championships in the beginning of September, where the best 24 players will compete. And well, if BBD manages to put up a good finish as this Grand Prix here, he will earn an invite as the player who got the most pro points at Grand Prix this year, or season rather.
Yeah, and Brian Bronduen, he's been travelling all over the world in order to get those points. He's been playing events in Europe, he's been playing events in South America, he's made it out to Australia here for this GP. This has been very much a sort of saga that's built itself up over the course of the year. And he says that he's been having a whale of a time with all of that travel.
Morkroot Necropod. It's a 7/7 menace that has a cost. If you want to attack with it, you have to sacrifice a permanent.
Plenty of lands in play here for Mahara though, so I don't think he'll necessarily mind too much with that. Yeah, you're sacrificing creatures or land, so you can't just throw away clues, which would otherwise, I'm sure, be pretty tempting. The Necropod, the Slug Horror, cares little for clues. Brian Bronduen, though, he does have this advanced Stitchwing that he's going to be able to keep trucking in with. I mean, Liliana's Elite on the ground, also a relatively sizable creature here. There's already a couple of, there's 3 creatures in the graveyard thus far, meaning it is currently a 4/4 and set to grow potentially.
Yeah, so the way this is shaping up now with the Wildenpack Outcast coming down, if the board state stays as is, Mihara is not able to set up great attacks. His Necropod would just probably trade for an Elder Deep Fiend, which isn't the worst, but still not super favorable. Liliana's Elite will just run into the Elder Deep Fiend, and Mihara is taking some damage from that advanced Stitchwing. Wow, now here is Wrath.
He had to get back the Sanitarium Skeleton in order to have enough cards in hand to have 3 cards to discard.
He can even Madness the Twins of Mara Estate. This
wow.
is insane.
Let's break down what's just happened here, because Nahiri's Wrath, not a card that you necessarily see too often. So Nahiri's Wrath, we've got it up on screen here. We had 3 cards discarded by Makihito Mihara. Those cards then dealt damage equal to their total converted mana cost to 3 targets.
Yeah,
those
because he
being
discarded 3 cards.
all of Brian Bronduen's creatures. And because Twins of Mara Estate was being discarded, Makihito Mihara able to play the Madness cost, put that creature straight into play. So all told, the mythic rare just gigantic in that game in squaring things up.
Yeah, he was able to deal 8 damage total to 3 different creatures. That's not a bad deal for just 3 mana.
Yeah, I mean, only a single card being used there in order to do it. Just massively powerful. It looked like Brian Bronduen was on easy street and had sort of locked up this match. But no, all it took was the right card for Mihara to get right back in things. And now we're starting to see, firstly, why Mahara's on the record that he is, but also why it is that he's playing so many different colors. He just has,
So
I mean,
many
there's no
powerful
way that you're not
cards.
going to splash that one.
Yeah, it has been called the best rare in Eldritch Moon. Now, we can discuss for days on what the best rare actually is. Perhaps it's Gisela, perhaps it's Nahiri's Wrath, perhaps it's another card. But one way or another, in this game here, wow. Just for 3 mana, and he even got it as a Madness outlet. He was able to decimate BBD's board, just shoot fire at all of his creatures, and then, well, I mean, that was basically that. Mihara had some creatures around, but it didn't even matter much which ones they were. Any monsters would have locked it up.
Yeah, they were just on cleanup duty at that point. And Brian Bronduen, you see him there. He's just kind of thinking his way back through that game, because the games like that are the ones where, could I have got some more damage through sooner? Was there something that I could have played a little differently to make that all work out? I mean, if he didn't know about the Nahiri's Wrath, then realistically it's a very hard card to put somebody on.
Yeah, you can't expect that. He will definitely have to keep it in mind for the next game, but it's still a hard card to play around. You pretty much still have to keep playing your cards. Maybe if the board is I don't know, really close. You could keep one card back in hand, but yeah.
There's one card that if he has it, he will be sideboarding in against this one. That one being Turn Aside.
Oh wow, because Nahiri's Rod targets at least a permanent of his, so you deny the opponent the opportunity to burn all of your creatures, and they still have to pay the cost because it's just a cost to play Nahiri's Rod. So they lose their entire hand. They think they're gonna win the game, and then you're ready with no counterspell. A blue player's dream.
I think we have a new winner for the most exciting thing to possibly turn aside in the format.
Oh yes.
But a quick thumbs up from Brian Braun-Duin as he draws his 7-card hand. Starts off with just an island, passes things back to Mihara, who kicks things off with a swamp, and looks like he might be considering a Sanitarium Skeleton here.
Yeah, if he doesn't, if he is not willing to play it here, might signal some Nahiri's Rod shenanigans later on. But even then, you can always get it back from the graveyard.
Thermo Alchemist hoping to do more of what he was able to achieve in game 1 here for Brian Braun-Duin, just sort of plinking away, getting that damage in wherever possible.
So far it's the MVP of the match for BBD.
Not an Elder Deep friend?
Nope.
Fair enough. Liliana's Elite here coming down for Makihito Mihara. Currently just a 1-1 for 3. Not the greatest of rates, but he just kind of wants to get creatures on the board. But wow, if we're talking about powerful rares, both these players have them. Niblis of Frost, that one a very big deal.
Yep, 3/3 flyer, and whenever you play an instant or a sorcery, you get to ice down an opposing creature for a turn.
A Cursed Witch on the other side for Makihito Mihara, though. That one potentially a really nice one in the face of Thermo Alchemist, because if it does die and transform, then it will potentially just meet back the damage that is being dealt out by Thermo Alchemist each turn in the form of life drain every single turn.
Well, it has to die first.
There is
And
that.
Remember that Niblis of Frost can just tap down a creature on the other side of the battlefield. Well, it's not going to be the Accursed Witch, though it may be several turns down the line. Just for mana efficiency, BBD chooses to drag under the creature with the highest converted mana cost on Mihara's side of the board. I like that play because it has the highest potential of stunting Mihara's mana development.
Well, when you've got a Niblis in Frost in play, your drag unders are just the most absurd Templo play imaginable. I'm going to ice down one of your creatures, bounce another one of your creatures, and draw a card. Also, you know, I'm then just going to get stuck into the red zone.
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, untap my Thermo Alchemist. This is exactly a masterclass on what this blue-red archetype is trying to do in the format.
Yeah. Spells is all that Brian Braun-Duin wants to draw at this point for some foreseeable time. Every time that Thermo Alchemist gets tapped and it's not Makihito Mihara's end of turn,
it doesn't
he
even
just
matter
kind of
what kind of spell it is. Here, take inventory. Well, just draw a card, lock down your creature, ping you for another point.
Yeah, this is brutal.
And Mihara is trying, but perhaps his 4-color deck is also coming back to pose some troubles, as I do see Nahiri's Rod in his hand, but he is not close to able to playing that with his assortment of islands and swamps. There's a Warp Landscape that can fetch a mountain from his deck, getting him closer to being able to cast that Nahiri's Rod, but so far he doesn't really seem to be able to deal with what BBD is doing in this game.
Now, worth noting with Nahiri's Wrath that sort of the downside on it, and it's a relatively small downside, it must be said, is that because you're discarding cards as part of the cost so you can have targets, you're always going to be down on cards. It's just a matter of you're almost certainly going to be well up in terms of quality, because you're discarding the worst cards in your hand to get rid of the best that your opponent has on offer.
Well, you can always discard some lands to it.
Yeah.
Right, if you discard, say, 2 lands and 1 5-cost card. That
One
is a
big
perfect,
emerge creature.
Yeah, that is still a very good deal.
Stitchwing Scab there coming down for Brian Braun-Duin, getting the Air Force going.
And I believe Mihara had the option of playing Haunted Dead on his previous turn, but chose not to, going for the mountain, hoping to draw a mountain so that he's able to cast Nahiri's Rod. Misses.
So Stitchwing Scab there, we can see it. It can potentially come back for Brian Braun-Duin if he's willing to discard a couple of cards and pay some mana to do so.
At the moment, Mihara is facing 2 lethal attackers. the Nidalis and the Stitchwing Scab. Haunted Dead can provide one 1/1 flyer as a blocker. That's a start at least. But does Mihara even have a second answer to the flyers? And even then, there's still this Thermo Alchemist.
Yeah, I mean,
he needs to deal with 3 creatures here. Now Nahiri's Wrath would be perfect, but he's not able to cast it, which, you know, these 4-color decks, they can't consistently play it all the time.
so
Oh, never mind. I thought Nahiri's Wrath was double red. It's actually single red, so
yeah,
That,
super splashable, super
okay.
powerful,
never mind.
does it all.
Well, then Mihara will be able to play it on this turn and indeed deal with those 3 creatures.
But the Scarb can potentially still come back here for Brian Braun-Duin. He's got the mana up and he's got the cards in hand to get it back. Yeah, Makihito Mihara in a tough spot here. He recognises there's not really any point trying to get rid of the Scarb with Nahiri's Wrath. Instead, just dealing with the other 2 creatures on the board, which are clearly problematic. Brian Braun-Duin activates his Thermo Alchemist, has a Convolute.
We talked about this. Well, it's not the turn aside that you mentioned, but hey, it will still counter the Nahiri's Wrath. You have to pay 4 more. Mihara does not have the mana available.
Yeah, this the dark side of discarding your hand to your Nahiri's Wrath.
Yep.
Also gets to tap down a creature. Or, I mean, that enough to elicit the handshake. Brian Braun-Duin just... If you're looking to even draft a decent red-blue spells deck, you will be doing well to get to a deck quite like the one that Brian Braun-Duin has been able to put together. He's got a number of very, very powerful cards here, but the commons in this deck, I mean, you know, the Drag Unders, the Thermo Alchemists, they're doing as much work as the rares here in some respects. It's not just about any one card with the red-blue spells deck. It's about the synergy of how they work together and what they can produce, and that ultimately what was able to produce the 2-1 victory here for Brian Braun-Duin.
Yep. And it's well, this Nahiri's Wrath has even gone up way higher in my estimation now. Now that I've learned that it's only a single red. Pretty sure I've been playing it all wrong in the draft I did with it. Weird how cards just get stuck into your mind as doing something, and then all of a sudden you learn that it does.
Yeah, you can get card
something
blind
else.
sometimes.
This always happens with new sets. Team can't read is how Eureka is sometimes called.
Well, I mean, various of you are playing in not your first language, but that is the end of our round 8, so we are going to pass things over to BDM and to Marshall Sutcliffe now. But from me, Tim Willoughby, and from Dr. Frank Carsten, we bid you adieu from GP Sydney, and we will see you guys tomorrow.
Outfit your Magic collection with the newest Eldritch Moon accessories from Ultra Pro. You can see the full array of card sleeves, deck boxes, playmats, and portfolios of your favorite Magic artwork at ultrapro.com. Put your game to the test at a Grand Prix. These Magic celebrations are headlined by 2-day open tournaments with the best players in your region, as well as top Magic pros from around the world. Upcoming Grand Prix include Lille, Indianapolis, Guangzhou, Louisville, and Kyoto. Visit magic.wizards.com